James Burton,
Here.
Ken Jones,
Present.
Jeff Gard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Here.
James Weiss.
Here.
That is everyone.
Okay, tonight's work session topic is the 2019 budget discussion. And with that, I'll turn it over to Manager Lanning.
Okay, here we go again. From a scheduling standpoint, we're going to have a reading, probably the second one in December, so or the first one if possible. I was thinking that depending upon how we go tonight, that a meeting next Wednesday might be appropriate for us to have a longer session because we always get stuck in this hour or 45 minutes. But we've been around this horn several times, and last week, if you refer on the front of your packet to the memo I gave you on November 7th, I made some recommendations. I think there are two things that are pretty clear for us. One is we have more requests and needs than we have revenue, and two, we have less revenue than we have needs and requests. So somehow we have to bridge that gap. We're pretty late in the year to come up with $1 million in new revenue. Although I have said, and I think I said way back, I was trying to find my picture of the board from strategic planning that laid out our revenue choices. But one of the ones that I've always been in favor of that is relatively, it's not easy, but it's uncomplicated for us to implement is sales tax. And I know there have been various reasons for and against that, but that's about a $500,000 fix. So I'd like to hear from you, and I'd like to get your ideas and move forward with some consensus, because we often get individual input. I'd like to see this, I'd like to see that, and that's hard to move forward with. But here's what I heard at the last meeting. First of all, we have a $1 million hole in our budget based upon requests and known shortfalls. That $1 million is based upon an additional $400,000 request from the school district and a known PERS problem of $581,000 rounded off to $600,000. So if you look at line 726 in the budget, you'll see that I have put in this budget a $600,000 shortfall. And on line 715, that shortfall is accounted for because of $1.2 million going to CCMC for the PERS obligation. The PERS obligation for the hospitals, and this is the PERS obligation that is the additional 17%. There's 5% paid for the employees, they match with 8% on their own, and then the other 17% is the PERS relief portion that goes to fund the state PERS system to keep it solvent. That was the fix that was devised, 2008, 2006, the last legislative fix for that. So that's calculated into this budget. However, I made a recommendation. We'd like to talk to the PERS folks and get a payment plan set up for the PERS that we are currently in the rears. That number's 581 and change. That's a separate issue. And then there's the budget going forward. In the 19 budget, in my packet, I have reduced the 1.2 million to 600,000. That number intentionally would carry us through June, but it eliminates the deficit to create a balanced budget. During the course of early to mid-2019. We would seek legislative solution or any other things that we can do to either mitigate the arrears PERS debt or give us an opportunity to fully explore our options. You know, we have ongoing meetings with, facilitated meetings with NVE happening right now. And we have, I've indicated to some of you, we have another entity that is going to be coming in January to speak to us in executive session regarding the same issue. So rather than get too far forward, the 600,000 gives us an opportunity to balance the budget going forward, at least temporarily. It gives us the opportunity to have some conversations and then readjust in June. That readjustment, worst case scenario, we will have to appropriate another $600,000, or we can do it 300 and 300, giving ourselves more time. Really what we're trying to do is buy some time here to get a different solution to this. Because from a purely financial perspective, prior to the end of the year, we've got to find $600,000 in revenue or make cuts associated with that. I've gone back through the budget and I've looked at cutting everything like we did in year one. Nobody gets any projects, nobody gets any equipment, nobody gets any travel. And I've done that exercise. I found about 400,000, which puts us exactly at the same level that you'll see in the 18 budget, which is 10,374. It puts us about at the same number. So I think those are your options. And while they may not seem like the greatest options, I think it is a manageable way to move forward. And then also having time to re-examine your potential revenue sources and plan again for some revenue, whether that be sales tax or whatever it might be. Do some public education for implementation sometime in 2019. I'm open to questions.
So you're suggesting to take the 1.2 that you have in for the hospital and make that 6, which covers
Half of 2019.
of the 2019
Well, it's gonna,
expected costs.
right, it's gonna fulfill all of their obligations. They'll be able to pay their PERS payments, they'll be able to pay their medical payments, all of those things. But by the end of June, we're gonna have to take another step.
That doesn't include, though,
The current arrears.
the current arrears.
No, the current arrears.
That's a separate issue.
That's a separate issue. It's 581 and change. We'll have conversations with the state. We'll have a payment plan that will probably fall into place sometime in 19, and we'll have to figure out what that appropriation is. My point being is, I guess what I'm thinking right now is, we're currently without a finance director. I've had sort of different flavors for how much money we have in the central treasury and what's available to us. And we have to resolve that issue as well. So again, this is buying us time, and we're taking it in smaller chunks with the ability to make some impact on this without eating the whole apple at once. Because if you want to eat the whole apple at once, then you have to budget at least another $1 million in this budget to pay the 581 and increase that to 1.6 million. So it's $1 million difference.
I guess I'm not I consider the current arrears a separate issue.
Yes.
But I don't think we can budget for less than what we know the costs are gonna be next year. But we have a budget for that. But if you, the 1.2, where is that coming out of their budget? Is that in their budget that they presented to us?
No, I think their budget is presented to us only has 600 in it.
Yeah, well, actually,
It doesn't have anything on city appropriations for 18 or 19,
right. and the
which can't be
reason-
right.
Well, the reason for that is it won't show up on our income statement because the city considers it a loan. So it goes as a liability on the balance sheet and it doesn't hit the income statement. So what we are asking for is the 1.2 that would.
So where does that show on your budget?
It doesn't show on the budget because you don't put it in the income statement.
Revenue, it's income,
Well, no, I'm not an accountant.
I understand.
What our accountants say.
It's considered a loan.
It's considered a
I
loan.
understand, but it's still gotta show on your revenue.
Well, there's a place here for funds from the city, and I don't know the accounting measure of it either,
It's
but
zero.
that would make sense. I sent you all an email today. Did you see that email?
I didn't see any emails today, the travel.
We have, James, I'm sorry, I forgot you're on the phone. Are you getting everything? You have the budget in your hand?
Yeah, I've got the budget in my hand, and also, well, there's a couple things. One, I hear Scott, but just barely. And then two, I actually had a question on this. So on line 715, we're talking about the CCMC budget appropriation. The last version of this before the 581,000 arrears was included, it had a line item of $600,000, correct?
Correct,
Okay, so now we bumped it up to 1.2 million on this sheet,
correct.
which shows us $600,000 in the hole. Basically, we doubled it and we don't have a way to pay for it. And
Correct.
that is the PERS arrears.
Yes.
What are you talking about when you say we have to come up with
No.
$600,000 halfway through next year?
That's not the PERS arrears. My apologies. The PERS,
They need $1.2 million plus
580
$181,000 for PERS arrears.
plus 581.
Why?
581 is what is in arrears. 1.2 million covers the PERS obligation for 2019 plus other expenses for the hospital going forward in 2019.
Okay, so just, unless I totally missed something, the last we talked about was the budget appropriation for CCMC was $600,000 in the last version of this budget. And then the request was for $581,000. That's the last that I saw. Okay, so that's $1.181 million. And then now it's 1.2 plus 581. How did we get there? That's a gigantic, that's a huge jump.
Yeah, I think I'll try to explain it this way. The 581 in arrears, well,
Hang on, am I wrong on my interpretation of where this went from to where it is, what I'm looking at right now?
no, you're not wrong. You know, I'll explain how I understand this. The 581 and change, the severity of that is more recent understanding of the PERS in arrears. We knew we were in arrears, but during the course of 2018, CCMC had petitioned the state and received a reprieve, if you will, from paying the arrears payments. So what we were dealing with was only current payments, and the current payments were only the 5% obligation from CCMC. Going forward, there's the arrears of 581, which the state sent a letter and said, you can't do that. So the 581 becomes due on a shorter time frame. And then going forward, we just can't pay the 5%. We have to pay the additional 17% on top of that. So the obligation is 22%. So when you take the CCMC request to cover the costs of medical and PERS in total for a year going forward, if you're gonna fully fund it, which was our anticipation, that forward number goes to 1.2 million.
So then the request essentially, in order for CCMC to be funded, is, just so I understand, is almost $1.8 million for 2019.
That is correct, including the PERS arrears. That's why, from a logistical standpoint, I am suggesting that we take this in bites, giving us an opportunity to make adjustments, legislative solutions, or other things that we can do, hitting it hard in 2019. You know, at the Alaska Municipal League Conference and the Managers Association, you know, PERS is really a problem for many, many people, and there are several hospitals that have unique problems, publicly owned hospitals that have unique problems going forward. Plus, we're also having conversations with other entities that might play into this. While I'm not trying to duck the $1.8 million obligation, which we know is the worst case scenario, I'm trying to preserve our cash flow and give us some time to see if we can mitigate some of this in 2019. That was my plan.
I'll let somebody else go. I've got more thoughts on this.
So maybe Scott can explain then, with that $1.2 million loan that's not part of our budget at all, when it comes to your bottom line then, so are you losing $990,000 in addition to that 1.2, or is that 990,000 covered by the 1.2?
No, the 1.2 would basically turn that around from a loss.
Would cover that.
Right.
Okay, what do you do with your depreciation?
We don't fund it.
Well, you do, it's part of your budget.
So, right, but we're not funding our depreciation with cash, if that's what you're asking.
Well, for your budget, because you do your cost studies, and you need to have depreciation in there so that you get some reimbursement for that depreciation from your funding sources. That $990,000 loss isn't $990,000, it's that less the 547 or whatever that is there, correct? And so you say you don't fund your depreciation, but it's part of your budget. And you can't say that you lost $1 million and have $500,000 in depreciation booked there.
Correct.
So your loss is only $500,000.
Well, it's, our depreciation we're budgeting for next year is $200,000.
Yeah, the copy I have.
Or correction, I mean, yeah, I'm looking at the wrong, 547.
547.
Yeah.
So that's a non-cash expense, so you're not drawing down that much cash.
Right, but, well, and so.
Exactly,
By the same token, your net income or loss isn't that
a cash
a
loss.
cash loss. It's
Exactly.
Correct.
Right.
Not a cash.
that less the depreciation.
Yeah, if you look at our,
So if we give them 1.2 million, what I'm saying, I guess, is if we give them 1.2 million, then they're getting 700,000 more than they need, according to their books. It's that 1. I wish the 1.2 was part of the revenues, however you want to record it,
Yeah.
because it's kind of magical here, but if we put if we put,
Yeah, it's tough for me because I don't know their accounting procedures, and I'm dealing more with requests and those kinds
well, the
of things
city
from our own.
typically doesn't do depreciation, we don't fund it except in some,
Well, I sent out a sheet to you many, many months ago that categorized all of our enterprise funds.
but the hospital is a different beast because.
I agree.
Because their recoveries, their payments from Medicaid and Medicare are based on their cost study, which includes that depreciation. They get reimbursed for that depreciation.
Some of it.
Part of it.
But there can also be
Right.
non-cash revenues, though, if if you're booking $1 million in collectibles and you really only collect $750,000, you have non-cash revenue that isn't showing up.
I guess, my point is, it's hard to believe anything. And, it's hard to trust anything because, everybody says, well, it's because it's hospital accounting. Well, it's not, it's common sense too. We got it there, but.
I know this, it feels tough, but I really think you're trying to buy yourself some time.
I don't think we're gonna buy ourselves any time from the 22%. We might get some time on that back payment that we owe $580,000, but we need, just like the city budgets for their PERS funds, every payday, we make the 22% payment, we budget for that, they need to budget for that as well. And they need to make that payment every time, and if we need more revenues somehow for that from the hospital, then the hospital needs to figure out how to get the revenues, whether that's from the city or raising their rates or some other thing.
Well, I think they figured out how to get it. But the question is, how do we get it? And that's the hard part going forward is, my thought about buying time is not trying to avoid any of this. I'm just trying to give us an opportunity to address this in a logical and methodical answer. We're trying to, we're trying to fix a lot of the past in a very short period of time, and 2 years is a pretty short period of time, and I think we've learned the same lesson with the harbor. 30 years of inaction has culminated into a grant and a loan to fix the harbor all along. So it's very similar similar issue.
No, not. That,
Jeff, talk into the mic.
that's a physical asset down there that's deteriorating. This is a financial deteriorating situation. My first year on the council here, if I remember right, we were $800,000 cash injection we needed to do into the hospital to keep everything solvent, and now we're up to 1.2. So that's like a 50% increase. I mean, where are we hemorrhaging all this stuff at? I can do math, but I can't do accounting, and none of this stuff makes any sense to me. So
I'd like to go again.
Go ahead, Councilman Burton.
Okay, so I agree with everything that Dave said. I'm looking at the CCMC budget information that's in the beginning of the pack, and it starts talking about salary increases. Is this just an across the board, we're gonna give everybody raises because of some, or not because of, but tied to some wage survey? So that's doable, but we need to come up with $500,000, $600,000 more. No, wait, $1 million more, $1.2 million more in order to cover PERS.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't agree with that philosophy, first. My next question is PERS retirement expenses listed in the CCMC budget information that's in this packet. The 2018 annualized amount, $1,117,172. The 2019 budget is $1,880,000. So it's a reduction of about $116,500 or so. So there's a reduction in PERS retirement expense. Can somebody offer a little bit of insight on why or how we got to a lower retirement expense in 2019? We need all this money to cover it, in addition to the arrears?
The salary budget for 2019 is a little different because some of the staff that we're budgeting for are not staff that are eligible for PERS. Some of them are actually temporary positions that don't receive any benefits at all. We've also had some changes with how we employ physicians, which has sort of reduced the amount that goes into PERS. So it's basically a reduction in the number of people that actually receive benefits. So we've employed several people that are temporary employees that are not eligible for any benefits whatsoever. So that's why you see the reduction from what we expect in 2018 to 2019. And just to let you know, the 2018 annualized, that's only through July of this year. And then we estimated out from there of what the rest of the year could be. We have seen a little bit of a decrease because of this change in how we're actually employing some of the staff.
And is that amount the full obligation or just the 5%?
So that's the full, that's the
Full
5% plus the 17.
Okay.
So I guess I'm a little lost in how you're coming up with needing the 1.2, Scott. Like Dave pointed out earlier, with the depreciation, that's not a cash cost, the way I understand how depreciation works. And then you have nowhere on here where you already are receiving 600,000. So if you take those two things into account, that 990 would go away. So I guess I'm confused where you're pulling I mean, I understand we need to catch up on our arrears, but with taking the depreciation off and then adding in what we already have budgeted to give to the hospital, it would be a balanced budget.
The thing you have to remember is that our budget that we put on here, we have to do accrual accounting. It's not cash accounting. So seeing that bottom line that says a $990,000 loss, that doesn't mean that's $990,000 cash. You take out the depreciation because that, we pay that, we've already paid the cash for that. The accounting for that is what's taking place in 2019. If we make another purchase in 2019 that maybe it's $100,000 for that piece of equipment, that's not going to show up on this income statement. It'll show up in depreciation, and depending on the equipment, we have to follow certain guidelines for the equipment. So for example, if we purchase an EKG machine that costs $30,000, let's say, so the government says we can't put that $30,000 on our books for this year. We have to amortize that out over 5 years, let's say. So out of that 30,000, you would only see 5,000 of that in that year, and then 5,000 the next year, 5,000 the year after that.
But that's a separate issue, Scott. That's talking about your capital requests or your capital money for buying those capital items. That doesn't have anything to do with your operating budget per se, except for that it will increase that depreciation over the next 5 or 10 or whatever years you're depreciating out that over, but it doesn't have anything to do with your the reason you're operating.
Right.
I mean,
So,
I'm trying to balance, like everybody else is, what your real needs are. I
right,
don't think we should, if your real needs are 1.2 million, which I haven't been proved yet, that where the need is there, I don't see it yet, but when it shows 442, I guess I'm looking for proof other than this magical hospital accounting, to show what the real needs are, because we can't be budgeting 600,000 now and then at the next year this time come back and say we're another $1 million in the hole. No, we need to budget accurately, and we've been doing this for a long enough time to where it shouldn't be as magic as it appears to be.
right. So
It's not even 1.2 though. It's $1.8 million. We're just not showing it, the rest of it on paper so that no one has a stroke.
Right, yeah, I agree with you.
So the initial 600,000 that was in the budget, that's basically what was in there, like what was in 2018. I think there was 625 in there this year. And so far, we've drawn down 500,000 of that. So we're working on the other part of it now. Going forward, the 600,000 was already in the budget, basically the same as that for general operations. The additional 600 that we're asking for is what we're estimating that extra PERS cost is going to be for all of next year.
So your plan to pay for that is just to ask the city for it?
Yes, that's based on the joint meeting that we had a couple weeks ago, where I was asked to put that in the budget.
And I understand that that's short term, that's a place where you go as to your first banker, but what would you do if your banker said no?
Then what we're doing now, I mean, we would continue to get in arrears in PERS. Right now, we're able to meet all of our operating obligations with the cash we have coming in, with the exception of the 581 as of this year. And that was part of this arrangement that the PERS was allowing us to do up until a few weeks ago.
But you're not meeting your obligations regardless of the arrears. You're still only wanting to pay 5% instead of 22%.
Correct.
Is that, Councilman Jones? Councilman Jones?
well, I guess you said that the 625 was already in your budget, but I don't see it in the revenues anywhere. And earlier you said it was on a loan. It's on your balance sheet, not on your income statement or profit and loss, whatever this is. So I guess I'm curious though, because if the 625 was counted as a revenue item and the depreciation was taken off, like I said earlier, this would be a balanced projection. So
the 625 was in 2018, and that's not shown on our income statement because according to our auditors and the cost report folks, we can't count that as revenue. It has to go in as a liability on the balance sheet because the city is considering it a loan. If the city said, we're not going to consider that a loan, then it would show up on our balance sheet and you would see the cash on there.
Essentially, you could write that below the net income or loss. You could write down city loan to make it balance is basically what you're doing.
But somehow that money is getting from the loan column and another piece of paper over to here because you're using that money on this. You're using it to operate.
The expenses.
Yeah, so where does it show up that you're using this for operation?
Again, I'm not a CFO or a CPA. I'm just telling you what our auditors and accountants tell us. So when the city gives us cash, we don't book that as revenue on the income statement. So the expense is still gonna show up here on the PERS, for example. And once we make the payment, it just comes off of our cash balance. It doesn't show up on the income statement. The expense is there every payroll. So it gets added in. So you'll see that on the expense side of it. But you don't see the income on there because of the accounting principles. And like I said, I'm not an accountant, so I can't cite to you why exactly that's done that way. But I know that was, I think we had actually done that in prior years, like 2014 or 15. And that was one of the reasons why we had issues with our audit in 2016. They had to actually go back and restate prior years, because I think that's how it had been, that it had been put on there as revenue instead of loan.
Well, to go a little bit further on that, I mean, if we turned around and gave you $10 million today, or gave CCMC $10 million today, you could turn around and say, well, that was a loan and that's on our liability sheet and it doesn't show up on our expense sheet. We still need more money. I mean, that's kind of the way that this is going. I think that's what everyone's getting at. And, you know, when we did the appropriation last year and then we ponied up for the pharmacy stuff and the buyout and whatnot, there was talk about how that was going to reduce the income generated by the 340B pharmacy was going to reduce, but the city was going to have to give to CCMC in order to supplement the budget, which we knew the city of Cordova was fine with, but that has totally proven to not be the case because we are now, so what, the CCMC is already $4.6 million in debt to the city of Cordova. And we're talking about another 1.8 right now. I know that the budget says 1.2, but that's not what it is. It's 1.8. I don't understand how we can keep going down this road. I don't understand how we can have a 2019 debt or loss and a subsidy need from the city of Cordova for 1.8 million bucks and be giving raises. Somebody answer that for me.
So, council, do you mind if I ask a question real quick? I think I have my arms around this. So basically what I've heard a couple times is the hospital's covering all of its operating expenses except PERS. And in 2018, in an effort to get the right hospital right side up, which it kind of has, at least it's covering everything except PERS. We weren't even that far beforehand. We kind of got a reprieve from the state that says, okay, you're in arrears, but we're not going to collect that, and we're only going to have you pay 5%, not 22%. So at 5%, we're almost kind of breaking even because we're paying part of the PERS. But if we look here, if we look at the total PERS retirement expense, it's about $1 million a year. So the $1 million for PERS, which is the piece that we're not, basically that we can't pay for, plus the 600,000 in arrears makes up that close to that 1.8 million that we're at. Is that right? But going forward, the state has said, no, you got to pay the full PERS and you have to pay back that 581. So we got a reprieve, kind of hoping we could get our cash flow and get some other things right side up, and deferred maintenance and everything else. So, okay.
I don't want to dominate this conversation, and I hope this is the last thing I say about this. I totally support CCMC. We need to have the hospital there, but I mean, I don't know who's in the audience listening to this. Hey, look around. We cannot swing almost $2 million a year for CCMC. It cannot be done. We do not have the resources to do that. We're not even funding the school, which has a lot more support behind it for full funding. We're not giving them the full amount that they're requesting. How, you know, this is an unreasonable expectation to be able to fund this.
So, Councilman Burton, I think that's what Manager Lanning is asking. You know, there's just so many options. You know, are we gonna raise revenues? Are we gonna, you know, flatten the city budget or school budget? You know, there's just so many options. I think what he's saying is one approach is just budget $600,000 halfway through to get halfway through the year and try to pull a rabbit out of a sock. And I think I heard Councilman Allison saying, no, let's see what the real cost is and budget for that, and then look at what we're really gonna have to do for revenues and expenses.
I think I'm trying to get to the crux of the request issues. It ramps up all the time, and we can't do it. We cannot do this. We don't have the money.
James, if I may, for just a second, I think part of the changing environment is the billing and the other contractual things that come from Medicaid, Medicare, insurance, all of those things. That environment for most, particularly hospitals in small communities, is very, very difficult. And I think we're seeing the reality of that for us now. You know, but we're not a stranger to it. Over the course of the years that I sent to you, you know, $4.6 million we've invested in the hospital, and you know, so I'm thinking you have three real options here. Let's just assume that the numbers are accurate. You can either eat the whole bullet, you can not eat it at all and suffer the consequences of that, or you could take it by smaller bites. And my suggestion was to take it by smaller bites. While it may not make you any less full at the end of the meal or hungry at the end, it gives you an opportunity to make thoughtful adjustments. And that's just what that was the suggestion I was making, but obviously I'll do whatever you want to do as a group. If you want to take the whole bite, then we just have to figure out how and when we're going to get it, how we're going to do that.
Councilman Allison, sorry.
Yeah, I guess I still go back to it. This budget that we've got here in front of us, which obviously we don't approve, but it has to be presented before we decide how much money we're gonna put in there for our budget. If it's accurate, as we assume it is, and we've got, you know, things in there such as bad debt and contractual adjustments, and so I guess I'm still looking for some evidence that the amount needed from the city is any different, irregardless of the arrears currently. If this budget here includes all of the current or all of the 2019 obligations all the way out to the 22% or whatever the total is, then your net income minus your depreciation is only 442. So where is the other 800,000? I mean, you've kind of alluded to that it's, you know, it's an accrual basis, but so is all the other items on your budget. So I guess that's what I'm looking at. Otherwise, I'm in favor of putting in our budget 442,764 and letting them deal with that till they come back and cry for more later.
I don't know how to explain the accounting function to you. First of all, it's not my budget and I'm not an accountant, but I think that's a question that has to be answered.
I've been involved in their budgets for 20-some years. I think I pretty fairly understand how their cost recovery system works. And you ought to be able to budget for it. You can't just have magic budgets. And you can't have, the incentive is not there. If every time you want to come back and ask for money and you've got a big bucket of money that you can always dip into, the incentive is not there to make do with what you got, or figure out another way to get it. So I guess unless I'm shown where their need is, other than coming back to us in 6 months and saying, oh, it's $1 million, well, show us where that $1 million is then. Show us where your expenses were different than what you budgeted. Otherwise, it's 442,764, my vote.
Councilman Gard?
So we don't have a CFO at the hospital. We don't have finance director here at the city. We do have hospital auditors and stuff that have been doing this. Can they speak to us in plain terms and show us where the dollars go? Because this isn't getting me there to where I understand this. I can't dump $1.5 million down a rabbit hole without understanding where it's going.
We've had an interim CFO for a while, and we have hired a new permanent CFO that will start at the end of December. The interim CFO is out for Thanksgiving, or he would be here tonight, and he could answer this a lot better than what I can. So we can definitely make him available.
Can we have a meeting on the 28th?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a fairly good idea what council's looking for? Okay. And remember, council, there's things like working capital as well. If you have a $13 million budget and you get behind billing on a couple months from some software package, you're $300,000 down like that. You still have to make payroll.
No, I
And if,
understand that.
I'm
This
just
is
saying, yeah.
a whole year's budget. This isn't
Yeah.
cash on hand issues. This is understanding the year's budget.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and conclude the work session then. November 28th, follow-up meeting.
A point of order, I guess. Are we concluding the work session or concluding the hospital portion?
Well, we have a public hearing at 6:40.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know if.
So that's council's discretion. I mean, we can extend. We're just kind of.
I would just say that, this hospital portion just took up our whole work session. So on the meeting on the 28th, is that going to be specific for hospital issues? Or are we going to have a marathon meeting to be able to discuss all of it? Because we still need to have meetings on this city budget.
Okay. It would be helpful to me to know what those issues are, because even in the hours that we've had, we've had different suggestions, and I don't have any clear direction from the group of where you want to go. So I'm trying to get you to a balanced budget without any additional revenue sources. And so you've got to tell me what you're thinking, what's out of order and where it's out of order or in order, so that I know. And I would offer that on the 28th, the very first thing we do is we've got to answer this question for the hospital and how that accounting goes. So that's the first question on the 28th. If we schedule a couple hours from 6 to 8 on the 28th, I think we can get through this, because then we have another meeting on the 5th right behind it, and that'll be 3 weeks in a row.
Okay.
Can I pose one real quick question?
Yes, go ahead, Councilman.
Before the November 28th meeting, can somebody do some quick homework and figure out what it would do for the accounting method and the books of CCMC if the loan from 2018 and previous loans and or a combination of those were converted to I don't know, gifts, like-kind contributions, something that shows up on hospital books on the revenue side instead of the liability side. Just get us some information on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then how is the city booking those as well? I mean, somewhere we should be showing that as a receivable or an asset or something, or?
You know,
I don't want an answer right now, I'm just making a point, but, November 28th is a Wednesday, and I have my regular board meeting that night, and I've got a budget to do there as well, so I just want to make council aware of that.
Tuesday or Thursday then, 27th or 29th?
29th, I can be available.
There's a hospital board meeting.
29th is the hospital. Tuesday, can we do Tuesday, 27th, 6 to 8?
Any objections, council? Okay,
All
As long
right,
as it's not in the morning, I'm good.
6 to 8 p.m.
okay.
Diaper duty in the morning?
What's that?
You want diaper duty in the morning?
And plowing, hopefully, if it starts snowing.
Watch your mouth.
Okay, anything else then? Rescheduled, and we gotta kick off with, hospital budget, a treatment of that, and then try to get into the city budget, 27th, 6 to 8. Okay, I'll adjourn the, work session. I'll call a,
Hang on, Kurt.
okay. Okay, I'll call the city council's public hearing to order, November 21st, 2018 at 6:50. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here?
James Burton,
Here.
Ken Jones,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
James Weiss.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Okay, the public hearing is for two items. The first is ordinance 1171. It's an ordinance of the city council of the city of Cordova, Alaska, authorizing the transfer of $269,000 from the general reserve fund, permanent fund, to the refuse enterprise fund as a loan for the purchase of a refuse truck and stating the repayment terms for the loan. The second item is ordinance 1172, an ordinance of the city of Cordova, city council of the city of Cordova, Alaska, declaring the tax foreclosed property commonly known as the Cordova Hotel, located at 604 First Street, Cordova, Alaska 99574, and legally described as lots 3 and 4, block 6, original town site of Cordova, Alaska, records of the Cordova Recording District, 3rd Judicial District, State of Alaska, parcel number 02-173-503, formerly owned by Doreen Wickham and deeded to the city by clerk's deed, is not required for a public purpose, and 2, authorizing and directing its sale. So would anybody like to speak to the public hearing items?
Move to recess to 50.
Excuse me?
Has anybody figured out how it's gonna be sold?
You have to come.
Yeah, if you could, Dave, if you could come up
Use the mic.
and use the mic, because we have a councilman online, and just state your name and residence for the record.
Yeah, my name's Dave Chipman and I occupy the space right next door to the property we're discussing tonight. And I was wondering, I have a concern on how it's gonna be handled
So for the disposal,
for the disposal
let's say,
and the maintenance before disposal.
okay, I'll defer to the city manager for the maintenance, or if you want me to jump in, Alan, or refer it to staff or to Susan.
Well, we've evaluated the building and we're gonna maintain the building throughout the winter or whatever that requires. we boarded up some windows and we have, Melvin goes over there on a regular basis to view the building and make sure nothing's out of order. So I don't feel like we're gonna have a lot of maintenance issues. I mean, there may be maintenance issues, but we're keeping track of it.
Is it fair to say that first the city determines that it doesn't require public use for the city, so the city won't retain it, and then planning and zoning, I assume, would probably make a recommendation then to the city to dispose of it, and then there's 4 different ways to dispose of it, either by direct negotiation or putting it up for bid and so forth. So it would, I think this would be the first step, and then those other steps would follow. And I'm assuming it'll, probably go out to public auction
Well, that would go.
or for public solicit bids to try and get the highest and best value for the city.
Because the way I interpret what the attorney said, it's to the city manager's discretion. Have you
No,
done that?
no. It's not until the city manager is directed by council to dispose of it that way. Yeah. So first there would be a public process on disposal. And
Okay, so it's not this next meeting where you guys vote, this is the second reading?
Wait 30 days.
Yeah, it'll be 30 days from today if it passes before we can even take the next step.
yeah, because we have to allow time for a referendum. So
Okay, and is the city gonna come up and tell us exactly what's for sale, clear title without any encumbrances, or the clouded title?
Susan.
I do not know, that the attorneys will inform us of exactly how. I'm sure we will need help writing the RFP on this one.
Yeah, as far as title search and encumbrances and back taxes and what the exact, I'd assume that it'd at least be clear whether the city has or hasn't done that, and whether that would be the responsibility of anyone who is bidding on it. I think there'd probably have to be a fair picture of what the city does and doesn't know about the property. And it sounds like you're really interested in following the course of this. Is there a way that we can put on a mailer or a circular, or I think it's in the zoning ordinances, or that any businesses within a certain radius, are they automatically notified, or?
Not on the,
Okay, so,
I was on planning zoning.
okay. I would say if
Make a
you,
change to the zoning, yes.
okay,
I don't see why the planning zoning get involved in this at all.
okay. Do you have any specific concerns or anything that you'd like to?
Yeah, I'm curious what's gonna happen,
Okay, great.
so whether I wanna buy it or not, that's another story. And I'm curious about who does buy it if I don't, so.
right.
Okay.
Best we can say is that it will be a very public process,
Yeah.
and if you get the city email, the part of a conversation, it'll all be advertised
They
there.
don't give me that, they took that away from me.
If you have an email address, we can send
I've
you
done
up
it,
for
I've
that.
done it twice, and they don't send it to me.
So what we're talking about here is the Alaska Hotel and Bar East.
Okay, that's.
Okay, all right.
No comments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and it will be followed through in a timely manner,
Yeah.
because we're running out of weather to do anything here. So, well, the city doesn't do that.
Government.
No government fast.
All right, just-
Every time they move fast, they get.
Okay,
I
thank you.
think it's gonna be at least a few months,
Yeah.
quickest, 3 or 4, so.
Hey, are there other public comments on the 2 items on the public hearing for this evening?
Move to adjourn the public hearing.
Second.
A motion and a second to adjourn the public hearing, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. And we've got a little 3-minute break before the regular meeting starts.